If society realizes what is at stake, how they are enslaved by this money lending and these banks, and we all know that that the New World Order is the banking cartel. That's their main power base. Well, we don't all know, but you and I know, and plenty other people. So and banking is the operation of lending at interest. That is what a bank does, and we need to create institutions that provide interest-free credit, so that there can be real democracy again. Because we also all know that states are heavily indebted to the money lenders, and the creditor is higher than the debtor. So the creditor is more powerful than the debtor. So the banks own the state and not the other way around. And that's a complete destruction of democracy and makes democracy a complete farce. I mean, we're completely under the boot of these bankers and creditors, and that's a disaster. That explains all the mayhem that we see: the lockdowns, the mass immigration, the poverty of the masses, the long working hours that we have. Because we mentioned this last time, but it merits stressing, and that is that the common man in Britain in 1500, before banking came back on the scene in Europe, worked 15 weeks per year to feed his family, and he had 200 holidays. That's how we lived back then.
It feels like a long distant memory now, though, doesn't it? And at the same time, that the Industrial Revolution was promised as you won't need to work as long, and technology is going to take over, and you'll have more leisure time. Who was it? Was it Keynes? Was it Keynesian economics? Is that this whole push for more and more technology and mechanization and automation will free man up, so that he doesn't have to work in the factories as long as he's been working, and he can go back to his leisure and he can pursue art and philosophy. But the reality is we're working longer than ever before, even with all this technology.
Yes, that's the way it is, and it's all pure Orwellian crap. I mean, the only ones who got freed up and saw leisure were the very rich who were lending. So
because when musicians, for instance, the holy grail for musicians is to make a hit record and get the royalties, which they can live off for the rest of their lives. And, it's interesting the name, isn't it? Royalties. Royalties is you don't have to work anymore because you're receiving a payment forever, right? So that's what these guys are doing, is they're able to get this monopoly over credit that they have, that therefore they're not burdened by ideas of survival, and they can just live a life of leisure on the backs of our labor. How do you think that to get a monopoly has to be enforced with violence in order for it to be protected? Otherwise, the people will rise up and say, hang on a minute, you're thieving from us, we'll take it back. How do you think these moneylenders are able to exercise this monopoly over the people for so long? What do you think the mechanisms are in place there?
Well, one is mind control, because people adore the rich, and this is a very sad state of affairs. They think the rich are successful and work hard. I mean, it's the biggest joke that you can imagine, that the rich work hard. The last thing that they want to do is work hard. I mean, that's for us, But at any rate, they're so-called successful, and people don't mind if you plunder everything, as long as you get rich and can show off your bling, and people will like you and think you're doing well. So that's a huge blindness in the masses, and a really very grave problem with spiritual awareness of the masses, because there's a huge part of this is spiritual in nature.
But it's like, we talked about this. Sorry, go on.
Because the second thing that I wanted to say is that creditors have a huge sway over those to whom they lend, and this is also the case with states. So they have huge sway over states, and if one state rebels against their rule, then they can involve other states to enforce their loans. And this is what they've written in their texts. The creditors have their texts, and they've written about this in their books. And they will simply say, if this or that country comes in, starts rebelling against us, we will bring the guns of China or the US or Japan against them. So
Well, we see that, don't we, with John Perkins, who wrote the Confessions of an Economic Hitman, gave us a little glimpse behind the scenes. He revealed what's behind the curtain a little bit and explained how the CIA, or the banking cartel, this is probably the same interchangeable term there, isn't it? Right? They would go into third world countries and offer these, make them an offer they couldn't refuse in terms of these huge loans from the IMF and stuff. But the country taking the loan would have to stake actual physical real assets like the water supply or the electric supply or the taxes upon the people. That would be the security in order for the loan. Then, because they control interest rates, right, they would ramp up interest rates, put the country into default. They couldn't pay, and then they had to transfer the real assets. It's like, it's a simple game that they've been getting away with for a long, long time. Because it's not just third world countries they do this in. They do it here in this country. They probably perfected the scam here before they exported it to these third world places.